We all know the standard story of early humans: primitive cave dwellers, barely surviving, incapable of complex thought. It's a comfortable story, but it's wrong. Tens of thousands of years before the pyramids, before agriculture, and before writing, our ancestors were already creating masterpieces of breathtaking sophistication. Deep in the caves and frozen soil of Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have unearthed 5 artifacts that completely shatter the timeline of human intelligence. These objects aren't crude tools. They are too precise, too intentional, and hint at an inner emotional life almost identical to our own. Today we're exploring 5 of the most extraordinary prehistoric objects ever discovered, and by the end of this video, you'll realize the ancient world was far less primitive and far more mysterious than anyone dared to imagine. First, the lions in the firelight. In 1994, 3 cavers exploring the limestone cliffs of southern France noticed a draft of air coming from a pile of fallen rocks. They cleared the debris, crawled through a narrow passage, and dropped into a sealed, silent world. What they found on the walls of the Chauvet Cave didn't just rewrite art history, it completely shattered the idea that human artistic ability evolved slowly from crude, primitive scratchings into masterpieces. Painted in charcoal and red ochre and dated to an astonishing 36,000 years ago, are hundreds of animals. But these are not simple stick figures. They are masterclasses in perspective, shading, and anatomy. A pride of cave lions stalks across the rock face, their expressions intense, their bodies overlapping to create depth. Rhinos clash horns, horses toss their heads. The artists used the natural contours of the cave wall to give the animals 3-dimensional bulk. Even more incredibly, they drew overlapping legs and multiple heads to convey movement, so that under the flickering light of a prehistoric torch, the animals would literally appear to run across the stone. The question that lingers over Chauvet is how? How did artists working tens of thousands of years ago achieve a standard of representation, shading, and animation that wouldn't be consistently matched again for millennia? These weren't symbols or abstractions. They were sharp, careful observations of the natural world, rendered with an almost modern understanding of motion. Long before the invention of cinema, long before written language, the people of Chauvet were already animating their world. Second, the woman without a face. In 1908, 2 archaeologists working in the limestone hills of Lower Austria found something small enough to hold in a closed fist, yet vast enough to change how we understand the origins of human art. Near the village of Willendorf, buried in sediment that dated to somewhere between 25 and 30,000 years ago, they uncovered a tiny female figurine carved from oolitic limestone, a material not naturally found anywhere near the discovery site. She stands barely 4.5 inches tall. Her body is rendered in exaggerated rounded forms, generous hips, heavy breasts, a rounded abdomen. Her arms rest gently against her sides. Her legs taper to small, undefined feet. She has no face. Where a face should be, there is instead a carefully carved surface of horizontal bands, 7 rows of what appear to be tight braids or a woven cap, circling the entire head with mathematical regularity. The Venus of Willendorf, as she was named, was not unique. Similar figurines had already been found across Europe, and many more would follow. But she became the symbol of an entire tradition, the so-called Venus figurines, a phenomenon that stretched from the Atlantic coast of France all the way to the plains of Siberia, spanning thousands of miles and thousands of years, created by people who had no known means of contact with one another. The questions she raises have never been satisfactorily answered. Who was she meant to represent? The deliberate exaggeration of reproductive features has led many researchers to suggest she was a fertility symbol, perhaps a goddess figure, perhaps a talisman carried by hunters hoping to ensure the continuation of their group. But others argue the proportions aren't exaggerated at all. They're accurate depictions of what a pregnant woman looks like when viewed from certain angles, suggesting these were created by women as guides or affirmations related to pregnancy and birth. Then there is the question of the limestone itself. Geologists have traced the specific type of rock to sources hundreds of miles from where she was found. Someone carried her, or the raw material to make her, across a vast distance. She was important enough to transport. She mattered, and she has no face. Not because the carver lacked the skill. The intricate detail of her hair or head covering proves otherwise. The face was deliberately omitted or replaced with something else. Was this to make her universal? To deprive her of individual identity so she could represent all women, or one particular idea of womanhood? We don't know. We may never know. But 30,000 years after some unknown hand shaped her from foreign stone, she still holds her secret with perfect, eyeless calm. Third, the oldest portrait. In 2008, a small team excavating a cave in the Swabian Jura region of southern Germany made a discovery so extraordinary that it briefly seemed too good to be true. In a cave called Hohle Fels, German for hollow rock, they found a carved ivory figurine that radiocarbon dating placed at between 35 and 40,000 years old. This was not just the oldest figurine found in Europe. It was, at the time of its discovery, the oldest unambiguous figurative art ever found anywhere in the world. Someone had sat down 40,000 years ago, before modern humans had even spread across the entire planet, and carved a representation of a human body from the tusk of a woolly mammoth. Like the Venus of Willendorf, this figurine depicts a female form with similar exaggerated curves. But the Venus of Hohle Fels, as she came to be called, is smaller, rawer, somehow more urgent. She fits in a cupped palm. Her upper body leans forward slightly, arms extending downward, legs tapering to a point as though designed to be pushed into the earth or held upright in a hand. Where a head should be is instead a carefully drilled ring, a suspension hole. She was worn. She was carried against someone's body, perhaps for years, perhaps for a lifetime. She was not stored or displayed. She was held. The implications of this are staggering. This figurine predates the famous cave paintings of Lascaux by roughly 15 to 20,000 years. The people who made her were anatomically modern humans, but their culture, their symbolic world, their capacity for abstract thought, all of this was supposed to be in its infancy. Symbolic thinking, the ability to represent one thing by another, to make a physical object stand in for an idea, is considered one of the defining cognitive leaps of our species. But whoever made the Venus of Hohle Fels wasn't at the beginning of that leap. They were already deep in it. The craftsmanship, the deliberate choice of material, mammoth ivory is extraordinarily difficult to carve. The decision to make her wearable rather than static, all of this points to a tradition, a practice, a shared understanding of what this object meant and how it should be used. We didn't just wake up one day and suddenly become fully human. Something happened much earlier, much deeper in time than the history books have been comfortable acknowledging. And this tiny, worn figurine, pulled from 40,000 years of darkness, may be telling us what it looked like. Fourth, the man who was also a lion. In the same region of southern Germany, in a cave called Hohensteinstadel, another ivory figure was found, but this one was unlike anything that had come before or has come since. First discovered in fragments in 1939, then painstakingly reconstructed over decades, the Lion Man of Hohensteinstadel stands nearly a foot tall and dates to approximately 40,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest sculptures in the world. He stands upright, like a human, but his head is the head of a cave lion, muzzle forward, ears back, the unmistakable features of one of the largest and most feared predators in Ice Age Europe. He is not a human wearing a mask. He is not a human with a lion's head placed on top like a decoration. He is something genuinely in between, a being that combines the body of a man and the head of a beast in a way that seems intentional, considered, theologically precise. This matters enormously. Carving a realistic animal is one cognitive achievement. Carving a realistic human is another. But carving something that deliberately fuses the two, a being that doesn't exist in nature, that could only exist in the imagination, requires a qualitatively different kind of thinking. It requires the ability to hold two concepts simultaneously and combine them into a third. It requires mythology. The Lion Man is not a mistake or a whim. Experimental carving with mammoth ivory has shown that creating a figure of this size and complexity would have required approximately 400 hours of careful, skilled work. Someone spent weeks, perhaps months, making this object. Others presumably watched or helped or understood what was being made and why. This was a community project, a deliberate cultural creation. What did he mean to the people who made him? Shamans in many cultures historically wore animal costumes to enter altered states, to mediate between the human and spirit worlds. Was the Lion Man a representation of such a figure? A shaman mid-transformation, caught between states? Was he a god? A protector? A warning? We cannot know. But we know that 40,000 years ago, our ancestors were already telling stories complex enough to require a being that was simultaneously human and not human. They were already living inside a world of symbols and spirits and meaning that extended far beyond the practical and the immediate. They already needed myths, and they carved one from ivory and left it for us, buried in the dark, to find. Fifth, two reindeer swimming to the future. In 1866, a workman blasting through ancient cave deposits at the Montestric rock shelter in the Tarn-et-Garonne region of France struck something unexpected in the debris. a fragment of mammoth tusk, carved. He pulled it from the rubble and found himself holding two reindeer, swimming nose to tail. The swimming reindeer, as the carving came to be known, is roughly 10 inches long and dates to approximately 13,000 years ago. It was created during the last ice age by people who watched reindeer cross rivers every autumn during their seasonal migrations. And whoever carved it had watched with extraordinary attention. The leading reindeer is a smaller female, her head raised in the exact posture a swimming reindeer adopts to keep above water. The larger male follows close behind her, his impressive antlers swept back against his body. The bodies of both animals are elongated in the way that swimming mammals stretch out in water. Every detail reflects a practiced, intimate familiarity with these animals, not as prey, but as subjects worthy of sustained, careful observation. What makes the swimming reindeer exceptional is not just its accuracy, but its composition. These two animals were deliberately carved from a single piece of tusk so that they would be seen together, one following the other, creating a narrative. This is not a catalog of an animal's features. It is a moment, a story. Two specific animals, at a specific point in their migration, doing a specific thing that this artist found worth capturing forever. The carver understood negative space, the way the curves of one body complemented the other, the way the empty space between them created tension and movement. They understood how to suggest water without depicting it, how to imply motion in a static medium. These are the concerns of a serious artist, not a craftsperson simply reproducing forms. 13,000 years ago, as the Ice Age was drawing toward its close and the great herds that had sustained these people for generations were beginning to thin, someone sat down with a piece of mammoth tusk and made something beautiful. Not useful, not practical, not a tool or a weapon or a symbol with obvious religious purpose. Something that captured a moment of grace, two animals crossing a river together, because that moment deserved to be remembered. That impulse, to make something beautiful simply because beauty matters, is one of the things that makes us human. And finding it preserved in mammoth ivory, 13 millennia old, untouched in the dark until a workman's blast set it free, is one of the most moving experiences archaeological discovery has to offer. 5 moments of ancient human creativity, preserved against all probability, each one outlasting the hands that made them by tens of thousands of years. A pair of swimming deer frozen mid-stroke. A creature neither man nor beast. A figurine worn against someone's heart. A faceless woman carried across a continent. And a pride of lions stalking through flickering firelight. What connects them, across the vast distances of time and space that separate them, is intention. Each of these objects was made with purpose, with skill, with a vision of what it should be that the maker pursued carefully and completely. Each one tells us that the person who made it had an inner life, a world of meaning, belief, beauty, and story that was fully human in every way that matters. We have spent a great deal of time imagining our prehistoric ancestors as fundamentally other, simpler, less. These 5 artifacts insist otherwise. They insist that from the very earliest chapters of our story, human beings have been creatures who needed more than food and shelter. We needed meaning. We needed beauty. We needed to make things that would outlast us and speak to people we would never meet. These objects have outlasted their makers by tens of thousands of years. They are speaking to us right now. The question is whether we are listening carefully enough to hear what they are saying.